This is what I dreamed of. This is the moment that I was waiting for. I'm super excited to be going to Atlanta.
There's an attempt to trade these guys. It's not going to be easy. There's not going to be some wide array of teams raising their hand and trying to get in on the bidding. Hawks certainly are indicating that they're looking for the exit ramp with Trae Young. They did not make any attempt to get him signed to an extension. When that's the case with your face of the franchise, that's a pretty clear message that the end could be near.
For months, the NBA whispered that Trae Young could be the next superstar traded. Everyone tried to guess the destination. Contenders, big markets, teams already built to win. But the team that actually pulled the trigger? The Washington Wizards, a franchise stuck in the middle, a team desperate for direction, and now, the home of one of the league's most polarizing stars. This wasn't the trade anyone predicted, but it might be the one both franchises needed. There were rumors Trae Young could be on the move. League insiders hinted Atlanta was listening, and fans debated which teams made the most sense. But Washington was never part of that conversation. No leaks, no buzz, no buildup, which is exactly why this trade landed the way it did. Quietly, suddenly, and without warning. Trae Young is headed to Washington, and in return, the Atlanta Hawks receive CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert. At first glance, it feels uneven, but once you break it down, this trade reveals exactly where both franchises are headed. For nearly 7 seasons, Trae Young was Atlanta basketball, a franchise cornerstone, a multiple-time All-Star, one of the most explosive offensive engines in the league. At his peak, Trae carried an offense almost entirely on his shoulders. Atlanta's system revolved around his ability to create deep pull-up threes, manipulating pick and rolls, and generating offense late in the shot clock. But over time, the same issues kept resurfacing. The Hawks tried different roster constructions, defensive wings, secondary ball handlers, rim-running bigs, more shooting, yet the results stayed frustratingly similar. When Trae was great, Atlanta looked dangerous. When he wasn't perfect, everything unraveled. That margin for error became impossible to ignore. A deep playoff run raised expectations, but the seasons that followed were defined by inconsistency, defensive limitations, and a system that demanded perfection from one player every single night. Eventually, Atlanta had to face a hard truth. Building a contender entirely around Trae Young wasn't working. Not because he wasn't great, but because the formula had reached its limit. With Trae Young gone, Atlanta isn't just moving on from a star, they're committing to a completely new philosophy. For years, the Hawks were built around one central idea: maximize Trae's offensive brilliance and hope the rest could hold up around it. That approach created high highs, but it also created instability. Every roster decision had to fit one style, one pace, and one margin for error. This trade allows Atlanta to finally step back and ask a bigger question: what kind of team do we actually want to be? The answer appears to be versatility. Instead of centering everything around one ball-dominant guard, the Hawks are now prioritizing length, defense, and adaptability. This roster is built to switch more, run more, and share the workload offensively, rather than forcing creation through one player every possession. It's a philosophical shift from star-centric basketball to system-centric basketball. That doesn't mean Atlanta is giving up on offense. It means they're betting that a connected group built on wings, movement, and defensive flexibility can be more consistent over the long haul than a team dependent on one creator being perfect every night. This approach also aligns with where the modern NBA is heading. Teams that defend multiple positions, move the ball, and attack in waves are harder to scheme against in playoff settings. Atlanta is positioning itself to become that kind of team. They're not chasing headlines anymore. They're chasing structure. And that decision sets the foundation for everything that comes next in this new era. Atlanta's offense is about to look very different, and that's by design. For years, everything flowed through Trae Young. The Hawks leaned heavily on high pick-and-roll usage, deep pull-up shooting, and late clock creation. When it worked, the offense looked explosive. When it didn't, possessions stalled and the margin for error disappeared. Without Trae, Atlanta can finally shift away from a system built around one decision-maker and toward a more collective approach, and their personnel actually fits that vision. This offense will now revolve around movement, versatility, and shared responsibility. Jalen Johnson becomes a central piece as a forward who can grab the ball, push in transition, and make plays on the move. Instead of standing in the corner, he can operate as a connector, attacking closeouts, cutting off the ball, and initiating offense when the defense is scrambling. Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Dyson Daniels give Atlanta something it lacked before: guards who can defend, handle, and keep the ball moving without needing the offense to bend entirely around them. Both can pressure the rim, make quick reads, and maintain flow rather than slowing the game down. At the center of it all is Onyeka Okongwu, whose ability to screen, roll, and finish allows the Hawks to generate offense without relying on isolation. He thrives in motion-based sets where timing matters more than volume, and his presence keeps the paint active instead of static. Then there's Zachary Reese-Shea, whose shooting and off-ball instincts help space the floor and keep defenses honest. His movement without the ball becomes just as important as the ball itself, opening lanes for cutters and drivers. The pace may slow slightly, but the efficiency could rise. Without a single player to blitz or trap every possession, defenses will be forced to stay connected, making Atlanta harder to scheme against over the course of a game. This won't be the flashiest offense in the league, but it could be far more sustainable. Instead of living and dying by one-star shot-making, Atlanta can win possessions through spacing, timing, and execution. Most importantly, this shift aligns perfectly with the Hawks' new core. This offense isn't about one player carrying everything anymore. It's about 5 players connected on every possession. And that identity shift might be the most important outcome of this entire trade. This trade wasn't just about Atlanta changing direction. It was also about Trae Young needing a reset. For most of his career, Trae carried the weight of being the plan. When the Hawks won, it was because of him. When they lost, the conversation almost always circled back to his defense, his leadership style, or whether his brand of basketball could really translate to winning at the highest level. Every season felt like a referendum. Every playoff run came with an expiration date. Every offseason brought the same questions. Could you win with Trae as your best player? Could you build a defense around him? Could this style ever evolve? That kind of pressure adds up. Over time, it became clear that Trae wasn't just battling opponents. He was battling expectations that were never going away in Atlanta. Even strong performances were framed through doubt instead of belief. A new city gives Trae something he hasn't had in years: space to redefine himself. In Washington, there's no Eastern Conference Finals shadow hanging over him. No constant comparison to what should have happened years ago. Just a franchise that's asking him to lead, create, and grow alongside a roster that's still finding its identity. This isn't about Trae escaping responsibility. It's about him finally getting a chance to start fresh, without the weight of unfinished business following him every night. From Washington's perspective, this move is about direction. For years, the Wizards lived in NBA limbo. Not bad enough to rebuild, not good enough to compete. They shuffled veterans, chased short-term improvement, and ended up right back where they started. By trading for Trae Young, they finally chose a lane. They didn't just add talent, they added a centerpiece. Trae instantly becomes the offensive engine, the primary ball handler, and the face of the franchise. For the first time in years, Washington has a player defenses must game plan for every single night. This move isn't about instant contention. It's about finally having a foundation. Trae Young doesn't just raise Washington's ceiling, he changes how they play. With Trae on the floor, the pace increases. Spacing becomes mandatory. Every possession carries intention. His shooting range stretches defenses far beyond the arc, opening lanes that simply didn't exist before. His passing elevates role players and simplifies offensive reads. Washington's offense finally has structure, rhythm, and purpose instead of relying on improvisation. Yes, his defensive limitations remain part of the conversation, but Washington isn't asking Trae to be perfect. They're asking him to be elite at what he already does. Atlanta didn't replace Trae's production. They redistributed responsibility. That's where CJ McCollum comes in. CJ provides stability, professionalism, and control. He scores efficiently without monopolizing the ball, understands late-game situations, and gives a young locker room a steady veteran presence. More importantly, CJ is on an expiring contract worth roughly $30 million. That gives Atlanta something incredibly valuable during a transition: flexibility. That contract can come off the books or be used as a clean matching deal in a future move. For a team resetting its timeline, that optionality matters just as much as on-court production. CJ isn't the future, he's the bridge to it. Corey Kispert doesn't need plays drawn up for him to matter. His value comes from spacing, movement, and quick decision-making. He keeps defenses honest, opens driving lanes, and fits seamlessly into a ball movement-heavy system. Players like this don't dominate headlines, but they make modern offenses work. No major trade comes without risk. For Washington, expectations rise immediately. Roster construction now matters more than ever. For Atlanta, development becomes the priority. Letting go of a franchise star is never easy, but standing still was the bigger risk. Both teams chose uncertainty over stagnation. Trae Young didn't fail in Atlanta, and Atlanta didn't fail Trae Young. They simply reached the end of what they could be together. Now Washington has a franchise player to build around. Atlanta has the freedom to reimagine itself. This trade won't be judged today, or even this season. It'll be judged by what both teams become after it, because sometimes the boldest move isn't chasing more, it's choosing a different direction entirely.